Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to try to wrap our heads around something that sounds seriously futuristic: automating thought itself.
Now, while we're not quite handing out tiny thinking caps to our laptops just yet, what we're diving into is based on real research. And it uses those large language models, the AI behind those chatbots everyone's talking about.
Right, so less about robots suddenly waxing philosophical and more about getting AI to tackle those brainy tasks, but in a way that actually kind of looks like how we think.
Exactly. The research paper we're tackling today is called, get this, Automating Thought of Search, a journey towards soundness and completeness.
Catchy, right. But in all seriousness, academic papers aren't exactly known for their breezy style.
Yeah, 'cause where we come in, right? We'll break it down, make it digestible.
Exactly. Maybe you can even listen while you make your morning coffee. But before we get too far ahead, what do they mean by thought of search? Sounds kind of deep.
Honestly, it's simpler than it sounds. Imagine trying to find a recipe in a cookbook you wouldn't just flip through randomly, right?
What depends, am I feeling adventurous or do I need that specific chocolate chip cookie recipe?
Good point. But you'd probably have a strategy by cuisine, maybe by main ingredient, and that, my friend, is basically a search algorithm.
So I'm basically a coder in disguise.
In a way, yeah. Think about planning baking that cake we mentioned. You've got to plan ingredients, oven, mixing each step gets you closer to cakey goodness.
Okay, I'm with you. So are these researchers saying that instead of us coding every step, these LLMs can actually write those search strategies themselves?
You got it. That's the big idea. In this paper, they're introducing something called AutoTOS, short for Automating Thought of Search. It builds on older research, but takes it up a notch.
How so?
Well, before, you still needed humans to basically check the AI's homework, making sure the code it wrote was actually good.
Like show your work, but for AI.
Pretty much. AutoTOS is like, okay, AI, you're smart. Try grading your own homework this time.
So we're talking about AI that learns to learn. That's wild.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. To break it down a bit, how AutoTOS works is it starts with a prompt, almost like, here, AI, solve this puzzle.
What kind of puzzle are we talking about?
Oh, they used a bunch. One example was the 24 game. Remember that one? You got to make the number 24 using four given numbers in basic math.
Oh, yeah. I remember that from school. So they'd give the AI like 1, 5, 5, and 5, and it's got to find a way to hit 24.
Exactly. And the first thing this AutoTOS does is have the AI write code for what's called the goal test, basically. How to know when it solves the puzzle.
So in our example, the AI is writing code that's like, if I can make these numbers equal 24, I win.
You got it, setting its own finish line. But get this, it then writes code for the successor function.
Oh, that sounds intimidating.
Don't worry, it's just a fancy way of saying the AI is figuring out how to get to the next step in the puzzle based on where it is now.
So if it tries 1 plus 5, and that's not 24, the successor function helps it figure out what other math it can do with those other numbers. It's like the AI saying, okay, that didn't work. What do I try next?
And remember, it's writing code to do this.
Yeah, when you put it like that, it's pretty amazing. But even AI needs to show their work, right? I noticed the paper mentioned something about unit tests. Suddenly I'm back in high school, sweating over exams.
Thankfully, it's a little less stressful here. But you're right, it's like in programming, you don't just assume your code is perfect, you test it.
Right, like double-checking your answers before you turn in the test. So they gave the AI a bunch of pre-made tests to see if its code held up.
Exactly. Like, okay, AI, you wrote code to solve this, but does your code actually know that 24 is the goal?
And this is where that self-editing comes in, right? It wasn't just given the test, but also the ability to learn from its mistakes.
You got it. That feedback loop is key. It's not just getting the AI to code, but to code effectively.
Makes sense, a random AI isn't much help. But I gotta know, did it pass its exams?
You bet it did. Well, mostly. It aced those tests, which is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. It basically taught itself to solve those puzzles.
That's wild. And we're not talking about, like, add these two numbers level easy.
Okay, not at all. They threw some curveballs in there, stuff that AI researchers have been using to test AI for ages, things that need some serious logic and planning.
Okay, so real brain teaser territory. And it did well on all of them.
It did. They actually have a whole table 1, if you're following along in the paper, and it's impressive. Near perfect accuracy across the board, 5 different problems.
Now, that's what I call overachieving. Makes
Sure.
you wonder what else AI could learn if it can pick that up. But you said mostly earlier, were there any, shall we say, learning moments along the way? We do love a good blooper reel here at the Deep Dive.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't all smooth sailing, thankfully, because it makes for a much more entertaining deep dive.
Right. Give us the best AI fail.
Okay, so picture this. One of the LLMs, they were testing it with a crossword puzzle, nailed every single horizontal clue, no problem. But the vertical ones, total
Well,
disaster.
that's like if forgot crosswords go both ways.
Right, like it had the logic for one direction, but applying it, turning it sideways, totally missed that memo. Shows you there's still a lot to figure out, especially when it comes to AI really getting things we take for granted, like how space works.
Yeah, no kidding. What other quirks did they find?
Okay, this one's kind of funny. They were using the game Sokoban, where you push boxes around a grid. Well, one of the LLMs, it wrote code that let the player walk right through walls.
Maybe it thought it was playing a different game, one with less restrictive physics.
Like, it skipped the lesson on solid objects cannot pass through other solid objects.
It's kind of endearing in a way, right? Like
Yeah.
watching a little kid learn to walk, stumbles, but then those moments when you're like, whoa, they're actually doing it.
Exactly. And those stumbles, those bloopers, as funny as they are, they're super helpful for the researchers. It shows them where the LLMs still need to, well, learn.
Right. Okay, AI, you've got the logic down. Now let's work on that whole obeying the laws of physics thing. But all jokes aside, this is seriously mind-blowing stuff. We've seen AI ace tests. We've had a good laugh at its stumbles. But let's zoom out a bit. What does this mean? Are we on the verge of AI that can actually think like humans do?
Now, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something people have been debating for a long time. This research is exciting, no doubt, but I think we're still a ways off from true human-like thinking. What we are seeing is AI getting better at those complex instructions, solving those problems in a structured way.
So less sentient robots taking over and more really good algorithms that can do specific things really well.
Exactly. But even that has huge implications. Think about it. If AI can figure out that 24 game, what about designing new medicines, optimizing those crazy supply chains we hear so much about, maybe even writing amazing music?
Now you're talking. Speaking of composing, why don't we take a quick interlude to let all this sink in? We'll be back in a moment to wrap up this thought-provoking deep dive, so don't go anywhere. And we are back, folks, diving right back into the world of AutoTOS and what it might mean for the future of, well, thinking machines, I guess you could say.
We have covered a lot of ground, haven't we? That whole thing with Auto to Us, basically letting AI check its own work, wild.
And of course, those AI fails along the way.
Right. Gotta love those. A good reminder that even when AI is being brilliant, it can still trip over its own digital feet.
It's true. But like you were saying before the break, even if it's not exactly how our brains work, this whole thing of AI coding thought processes, it has some huge implications.
Huge, yeah, absolutely. And what really struck me when I was reading this paper, the researchers actually brought up this question that's both, well, kind of exciting and also a little bit, I don't know, unnerving.
Okay, now you have to tell me, what's the question?
So they ask, what if, and this is where it gets really interesting, what if someday these LLMs could write their own tests and learn even faster because of it? Like, not just solving the problems we throw at them, but actually figuring out how to challenge themselves.
Whoa, okay, that's next level. It's like instead of us giving AI the textbook, we're giving it the tools to write its own curriculum.
Right. And it makes you think, where does the human guidance stop and the AI's own journey, I guess you could call it? Where does that begin? It's a question I have a feeling we're going to be wrestling with more and more as this whole field keeps advancing.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to think about. But honestly, even just seeing how far things have come already, it's amazing. This research is a testament to what's possible when humans and AI, collaborate, work together.
Couldn't agree more. And who knows, maybe someday AI won't just be solving our puzzles or writing our code, but it might help us unlock some of those even bigger mysteries out there, like what is consciousness, that kind of thing.
Now, that would be a deep dive for the ages. But for now, we're going to have to surface back to reality. We hope you enjoyed this glimpse into the world of automating thought.
It's a field that definitely doesn't slow down, so who knows what amazing breakthroughs we'll be diving into next.
And to make sure you don't miss those future deep dives, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.